Hi parents, I'm Tammy. I was the Bible speaker this week at Lake Lundgren. Thank you so much for sending your kids out here. I hope when they come home they tell you all about it and you get your registration in for next year right away, because we want to see them back. We probably had just as much fun with them as they had with us. God was gracious to us, and the rain that came in was a doable rain. Kids were still making lemonade out of lemons, and we were having a blast in the rain. So thank you for sending your kids. We like to take a little time at the end of each session to be able to go through and tell you what we talked about this week. This will help you as parents to be able to have those conversations in your home that are very intentional, and the kids will be able to remember what they learned here. So I'm going to use some visuals we used here too to kind of bring it home for you. On day one, we really wanted to set the groundwork. Is God real? And that was our mission this week. Our whole mission, the whole week, we're spies. So the mission on day one was, is God real? What we used is we used a bag that looked like this. Actually, this is the bag. And I said to them, I said, well, I had a kid come up and he put his hand in here and I said, nothing in there, right? He said, nope, nothing in there. I said, well, maybe you just missed it. I don't know. You might have just missed something in the bag, because when I reach in the bag, I'm able to pull out something like this. And I pulled 3 of these out of this looking empty bag. And the kids were amazed. Where did that come from? The point was, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. The same is true with God. Just because you can't physically see Him, there's evidence of Him everywhere. Romans 1:20 was the verse we used for that, if you want to look it up and go through it with your kids. Another thing we used, another argument, is we took this puzzle from Cars, and I said, if I took this puzzle, and I'll use this same bag, and I emptied it all into this bag, like this, how long would we have to shake this up and down before it turned back into a puzzle? And of course the answer is, you could shake it forever, and it's never going to turn back into a puzzle. I asked them, why not? And one of the campers said, because you need someone to put it together. I said, exactly. Science will tell you that no one plus nothing equals everything. And that's not what we know. God had to be there at the beginning to be able to create. And so we need an intelligent designer to make the puzzle again. Look around you. An intelligent designer made a lot more than just a puzzle. Day 2, we had spy camp entrance. So I had 4 staff members come up, and they were all given a clean white t-shirt just like this. And I told them, put it on, and here's your mission. You need to go through this door and have a paintball game, and if you can come back with no paint marks on your shirt, then you can get into my super secret special spy camp. And everybody wants to get in there. And they said they were up for the mission. So they went behind a door, and each one came back with a different amount of paintball splats on their shirt. Some had big ones like this, some just 1 or 2, but they all had some. And I said, the reality is, you can't come into my super secret spy camp with even 1 paintball splat. Then one of our counselors came in wearing the original 4 white shirts, and he offered them a clean one. And he said, would you like a clean shirt? I'll take your dirty one. If you take a clean one, you can get into that spy camp. Some of them said yes, they'd like to swap, and some of them said no. And the reality is, that's exactly what salvation is like. It doesn't matter how much sin we have on us. Romans 3:23 says we all have some. But we can't get into heaven where a perfect, holy God lives with even 1. And so Jesus came down and offered us a clean slate. He said, I'll take your punishment. I'll give you a new white shirt. Some people say yes, and some people say no. We encouraged your campers and challenged them to really think about that and make the decision to join us in heaven forever. So many of them did. Ask your camper if they did. On day 3, we talked about all of the spy gear God gives us now that we're children of His. One of the things we use were walkie-talkies. And what happens if one person's talking on the walkie-talkie and doesn't give the other person time to answer? Well, there's no back and forth communication, and therefore there's no relationship that develops. That's the same as our prayer life with the Lord and reading the Bible. When we talk, we're praying to God. When we read the Bible, God's talking to us. We need both to develop that relationship. So we challenge the campers, get into your Bible and do your praying to develop that relationship. There were some other tools we gave them. I'd ask you to ask them about them, because we talked about night vision goggles, and we talked about super secret spy pens that had a camera in them. So we talked about a couple different things. Ask your campers and see if they remember. Today was day 4, and day 4 was all about going out and telling everybody else about the promises of God. And a promise is only good if the one who made it can keep it. So we talked about some different promises I made. I promised one of your kids to give him $1 million. Well, they didn't believe me, and they shouldn't, because I don't have $1 million. But the thing is, God can promise so much because He has all the resources, He has all the knowledge, and nothing is impossible for Him. So it's not the promise that holds any weight, it's the one who made the promise. We challenge your kids to understand that. Now we talked about, at the end of today's chapel, that promise for salvation, an eternity in heaven with God versus an eternity in hell separated from God, is available to anybody. And we had a fishbowl. In that fishbowl were 6 fish. And we talked about the fact that these fish need to be in there to be alive. If I take them out of the fishbowl, they will die. And so many people are walking around dying, going to spend an eternity without God. They need the saving bowl of where Jesus is and what He's done for them to live an eternity in heaven. And I took all the fish out of the fishbowl and I laid them across the stage outside of the water. Your kids were horrified. Oh my gosh, the fish! And after all 6 of them laid on the stage, I said, who's going to save the fish? And they came up in masses to save the fish. Not all the kids, some stayed back in their benches. At the end, after all 6 fish were safely back in their container, I said, now some of you, when you leave here, you're not going to want to go because those fish are kind of gross and scaly. I don't want to touch them. And you might feel that way about some of the people you meet, that I don't want to go near them. They're different, or they're the untouchables. I don't know. But the reality is, they need saving. Who's going to go? And we talked about how some of them, we're just going to let their friends go and do it for them. And that's the reality when we meet people too, is sometimes we're like, well, I'll just let somebody else tell them about Jesus. But maybe that's what God asked us to do. So I would challenge you just to have these spiritual conversations with your kids. I'm going to end with just one thing I want you to ask them. We held up 2 signs this week. One said, I am saved, so I obey. And the other one said, I obey, so I am saved. Ask your camper which one is right. I'm hoping that they'll tell you the right one, which is, I am saved, therefore I obey. So many of us think that it's obedience that gets us to heaven. And it's really salvation is what makes us want to obey, because we're now a part of God's family. Excellent conversations you're going to have with your camper this week. Thanks so much again for sending them. I love them, as do all the staff here, but not as much as God does. Thanks, parents.